I went to check on my neighbor that evening because her porch light had been flickering for days. That's how it started. Nothing more than a quiet inconvenience in an ordinary street. The kind of thing you mean to fix when you have time. But she was different. The kind of person you didn't rush past. Her name was Elena. Mid-40s, maybe a little older, but she carried herself like someone who'd learned to stop apologizing for her age. I'd seen her a few times, watering plants, talking on the phone in a low voice, the smell of coffee sometimes drifting across the fence. Always polite, always distant. That night, I stood outside her door holding a small toolbox, trying to decide if knocking was strange. We weren't close. She'd smiled once, months ago, when I helped her carry groceries. That was all. Still, something about the half-lit porch made me think she might appreciate someone noticing. I knocked. Once, twice. The door opened halfway, and she appeared, hair loose, sweater falling off one shoulder. Eyes a soft, tired gray that looked like they'd seen a long day. "Oh," she said, surprised. "It's you." "Yeah. Your porch light's been flickering. Thought I'd take a look." She hesitated, hand still on the knob. "You don't have to." "I know. I just couldn't unsee it." Something shifted in her expression. A tiny, reluctant curve of the lips that wasn't quite a smile. Then she stepped aside. "Come in, before the mosquitoes make a meal of us." Inside, her house was quiet in a way that made every sound feel louder. The faint hum of a refrigerator, the creak of floorboards, a soft jazz record playing somewhere in the background, old, imperfect, beautiful. She led me to the porch, watching me work with the kind of patience people reserve for strangers they aren't sure about. I could feel her presence behind me, the slow rhythm of her breathing, the faint trace of lavender in her perfume. "You always fix things for your neighbors?" she asked. "Only when I can't ignore them," I said. Dangerous habit. You'll end up responsible for everyone. Guess that's better than being invisible." She didn't answer, just looked out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. When I finished, the light steadied, warm and constant. She tilted her head, studying it like it meant something more than wiring. "Guess you're good at this," she said softly. "I try," I replied, wiping my hands. "It's the only thing that behaves when I tell it to." Her laugh was quiet, half amusement, half exhaustion. Then her eyes found mine, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. There was no sound, no motion, just that glance, unfiltered, searching, like she saw more than she meant to. "You're what, 20-something?" she asked finally. 23. She nodded, almost to herself. "Right. You've still got time to think everything means something." The words stung a little, though she hadn't meant them to. Maybe she was talking to herself. Maybe she was remembering something. I stood there, unsure if I should leave. She noticed. "Thank you," she said, voice gentler now. "Really. I've been meaning to fix it. Just didn't get around to it." "No problem. Glad to help." I turned toward the door, but she stopped me. "Wait." Her hand brushed my arm. Barely there, just enough to feel the warmth of her skin. It wasn't a touch that asked for anything, just acknowledgement. "You should take some coffee," she said quickly, like covering the moment. I brewed too much. I wanted to say yes, but something told me if I stayed, the air between us would turn into something neither of us could name yet. "Next time," I said instead. She smiled, real this time, quiet and knowing. "Sure. Next time." As I stepped out into the cool night, the porch light glowed steady behind me, casting a soft halo around her doorway. She lingered there for a moment before closing it, her shadow slipping away like the end of a song. I walked home, toolbox in hand, the faint smell of her coffee still clinging to my sleeve. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't think about her. Of course, I did. I'd planned to spend the weekend catching up on work at the repair shop, but every sound seemed to remind me of her house. The slow hum of the porch light, the rhythm of her footsteps on the wooden floor. By noon, I'd given up pretending. Her voice kept replaying in my head. "You've still got time to think everything means something." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just reading into a moment that didn't mean anything. But it felt like it did. And that feeling wouldn't go away. I told myself I had an excuse, a normal, harmless one. I'd left my screwdriver set at her place. That was true, though it wasn't why I went back. When she opened the door this time, she looked different. Same quiet elegance, but softer somehow. She was wearing a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a streak of paint on her wrist. "Back already?" she said, half smiling. "Left something?" I said, holding up an empty hand because I couldn't remember what exactly. "My tools, I think." She nodded slowly. "Right. Come in." I think I saw them near the window. Her living room was filled with afternoon light, dust drifting lazily in the air, a half-finished painting propped against the wall. It was a landscape, muted and foggy, almost colorless. I didn't know she painted. "You did this?" I asked, looking closer. She hesitated, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's nothing. Just something to keep the noise quiet." "What noise?" "The kind you can't hear unless you stop moving," she said quietly. There it was again, that strange weight in her words. Like she'd lived through things she didn't talk about. And every sentence carried a scar you could only see if you listened carefully. I found my tools, but I didn't leave. Instead, I stood beside her, studying the painting. "Looks like a memory," I said. "Something you're trying to remember or forget." Her eyes flicked toward me, surprised. "You notice too much." "Bad habit," I admitted. "Dangerous one," she replied. Her tone was half warning, half something else. The distance between us shrank, not physically but emotionally. The air had that fragile kind of silence that makes you aware of every breath. "Coffee?" she asked suddenly. I nodded, maybe too quickly. "Sure." In the kitchen, she moved with practiced ease, like someone used to doing everything alone. I noticed her hands, the slight tremor when she poured water, the faint scars on her knuckles, the quiet grace of someone who'd stopped trying to impress anyone. "You work with your hands, don't you?" she asked. "Yeah, always have." "That's good. The world needs people who can fix things." I smiled. "And what about you?" She looked at me then, eyes unreadable. "Some things can't be fixed." The words hung there, heavy and personal. She set down the mugs, fingers brushing the counter, avoiding my gaze. "Sorry," she said after a moment. "That sounded darker than I meant." "It didn't," I replied. "It sounded real." For the first time, she looked at me without the careful mask she wore. There was a tiredness there, but also warmth, a quiet acknowledgement of being seen. We stood in silence, both of us pretending to drink our coffee. The clock ticked too loudly. Outside, a dog barked once and stopped. She finally said, "You remind me of someone." "Good someone or bad someone?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who used to believe things mattered." There it was again, that wall between us, invisible but solid. She wasn't pushing me away exactly, but she was warning me there was more to her story than I understood. I wanted to ask what happened to them, but I didn't. I just nodded, and she seemed almost relieved that I didn't push further. When I finally stood to leave, she followed me to the door. The same porch light glowed steady above us, the one I'd fixed. She noticed me glance at it and said, "Still holding together." "Good," I said. "Means I did something right." She looked at me like she wanted to say something important, something she'd probably regret if she did. But she didn't. Her eyes softened, her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. And that silence, it felt louder than words. It rained that night. Slow, heavy rain that made the world outside sound smaller. I should have stayed in, but when the power flickered across the neighborhood, I thought of her house again. That porch light I'd fixed. The way she'd looked at it like it held something steady she didn't. So I grabbed my jacket and went. The street was empty, soaked in that quiet kind of loneliness you only hear in storms. Her house was dim, one light glowing from the kitchen. I almost turned back. Almost. But then I saw her shadow move across the curtain. She opened the door before I knocked. "You always show up when the world's ending?" she said, smiling faintly. Just making sure it's still standing. It is, she said, then hesitated. Barely. Her hair was damp, and she held a glass of wine in one hand. She looked softer than usual. Tired, maybe, or just unguarded. Power's out, she said. You want to wait it out here? I made dinner, sort of. Her sort of turned out to be pasta, half overcooked, half perfect. We ate by candlelight at her small kitchen table while rain tapped on the windows. The sound filled every pause we didn't know how to break. At first, we talked about nothing. Weather, work, the kind of things you say when you're pretending there's no tension building beneath each word. But somewhere between the second glass of wine and her quiet laugh, it shifted. You live alone? I asked. She nodded. For a long time now. No family nearby? She looked down at her plate. I had a son once. He's not around much these days. Her voice trailed off, and I knew not to ask more. The rain outside grew louder, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I noticed how she twisted the ring on her finger. Not a wedding ring, just a thin silver band. Her hands were beautiful in that real way, hands that had worked, created, lived. You ever wish things turned out differently? I asked quietly. She gave a soft, humorless laugh. If I start listing regrets, you'll be here till morning. I don't mind. She looked up, and something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe fear. The candlelight caught the edge of her face, painting her in gold. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because sometimes people believe them. The silence that followed was different this time. Charged, fragile, heavy. I could feel her pulse in the space between us. A gust of wind rattled the window, and she stood up quickly, pretending to check it. It's leaking again, she said. I joined her, standing close enough to smell the faint trace of her perfume. Lavender and something deeper. She held the window frame while I leaned in, trying to fix it. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. Her breath caught. Just once. Barely audible. The candlelight flickered. The air felt thick, almost alive. When I turned toward her, she was already looking at me. Too close. Her eyes searched mine. Not like she wanted to kiss me, but like she wanted to understand why she even wanted to. Elena, I said softly. She blinked, and something inside her seemed to tighten. You should go now. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was pleading, quiet, the kind of tone that hurts more than anger. I nodded slowly, stepping back, but I didn't look away. Neither did she. I grabbed my jacket, my hand brushing hers for just a second. That single second felt longer than the whole night. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle. The light from her kitchen window followed me as I walked down the street, glowing faintly through the rain. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, You should go now. And I did. But only my body left that room. For 3 days we didn't see each other. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just a neighbor, that I'd only gone there because of the rain. But the truth was simpler and worse. I missed her. Every time I passed her house, I slowed down. Her curtains stayed closed. The porch light still glowed steady, the one I'd fixed, the one that refused to flicker even when everything else did. On the 4th evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, she stood there. Same calm presence, same quiet grace. But her eyes, they looked uncertain, almost shy. I didn't mean to bother you, she said. My sink's leaking. Again. It was an excuse, and we both knew it. Of course, I said, grabbing my tools. Let's take a look. Her kitchen was dim, the fading light spilling across the counters. I knelt under the sink, listening to the slow drip of water hitting metal. But her silence above me was louder than the noise below. She handed me a towel, fingers brushing mine. An accidental touch that didn't feel accidental. Sorry, she murmured. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Not anymore. The air between us had changed since that night. It was thicker now, heavy with everything unspoken. When I finished, I turned and found her leaning against the counter, arms crossed loosely, her gaze fixed on me. You didn't have to come, she said softly. You called. Yeah, I did. Something in her voice trembled. She turned away, then back, her jaw tightening like she was fighting herself. "Elena," I said quietly, "you okay?" She laughed short, brittle. "That's the thing, isn't it? I don't even know what okay means anymore." Her hand went to her temple, rubbing gently. "It's been a strange few years. Empty house, fading friends, people asking if I'm lonely but never waiting for the answer." I didn't speak. I didn't want to fill the space with the wrong thing. "You shouldn't keep coming here," she continued after a long pause. "People will start to think—" Her voice drifted off. "I don't care what people think," I said. She looked at me sharply, like those words had landed somewhere she didn't want them to. "Don't say that," she whispered. "You're young. You'll care eventually." Her tone softened again. "I don't want to mess up your life because I forgot how to be careful." I stood there, heart pounding. "You haven't messed up anything. Then why do you look at me like that?" The question hit harder than I expected. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to understand something even I don't." I swallowed. "Maybe I am." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Full of things we'd both refused to admit. She exhaled, long and slow, as if letting go of something she'd held too tightly for too long. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. "Whatever this is." I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough for her to feel the pull. "Maybe it doesn't have to be." Her eyes met mine, wet, steady, unflinching. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then she said, "What are we doing?" The words trembled, half question, half confession. I didn't answer, couldn't, because anything I said would make it real. She turned her face slightly, as if afraid I might see too much. "You make me remember what it felt like to be wanted, and I hate that." I stepped closer again. Her breath caught. "You think I don't feel the same?" I said. Her hand gripped the counter. The room felt smaller, the light softer. Every second dragged like gravity. Then, she looked at me, really looked. All the restraint, all the denial, all the pretending. It cracked in that gaze. She didn't say anything, I'd later tell myself. She just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. After that night, something between us quietly broke, and somehow deepened. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. It was there in the pauses, in the way she lingered at her door when I passed by, in the way I pretended not to look for her car every evening. The air had changed, less like curiosity now, more like confession without words. A week passed before I saw her again. This time she came to the repair shop. I was tightening bolts on an engine when she stepped in, the smell of oil and metal mixing with the faint trace of her perfume. "You busy?" she asked, her tone lighter than it should have been. "Always," I said. "But for you, I can pretend I'm not." She smiled at that, one of those quiet smiles that almost hides a frown. "I just needed someone to check my car," she said, placing the keys on the counter. "It's making a strange noise." The excuse was thin, and we both knew it. I wiped my hands, gesturing for her to follow. She stood beside me as I lifted the hood, her shoulder brushing mine occasionally. She didn't move away this time. The rain started outside again, soft against the metal roof. There was something comforting about the sound, the isolation of it. The world felt smaller, and us closer. "You ever wonder," she said suddenly, "why certain people walk into your life when they do?" "All the time," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Maybe timing's just life's way of testing what you're ready for." I looked at her, waiting for what came next. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she traced a finger across the hood of the car, absently. "When I was your age," she began, voice low, "I was married. Too young, too fast. Thought love was supposed to save you." I didn't interrupt. "He wasn't cruel," she said softly. "Just absent. Like being with someone who's always half elsewhere. You start to think maybe you imagined what closeness was supposed to feel like." Her hands stopped moving, and she laughed under her breath. A small, broken sound. By the time I realized how alone I was, it was too late. My son was old enough to see it. I swallowed. You don't have to. I know, she cut in gently. But maybe I want to. The hum of the fluorescent light filled the silence. She took a deep breath. You remind me of him, you know, my son. The way you look at things like they still matter. Her eyes softened. But you also remind me of the person I was before I stopped believing that. Something inside me twisted. Guilt, confusion, longing, all tangled. I didn't know what to say. Elena, she smiled faintly. Don't. I know what this looks like. I just wanted you to know when I pull away, it's not because I don't feel something. It's because I do. Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to step closer, to tell her it didn't matter, that age or past didn't change what was real. But I didn't, because in her eyes, I saw it, the line she was afraid to cross. Not because she didn't want to, but because she already had once and it had cost her too much. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof like a heartbeat neither of us could ignore. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. You should probably finish up before I start saying things I can't take back. I closed the hood and turned to face her. Elena, I'm not afraid of what you'll say. She met my gaze for a long, trembling second. Then she took a breath, slow, shaky, like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. After that night in the repair shop, we both pretended nothing had changed. But pretending was becoming impossible. Her silence followed me everywhere. It lived in the grease on my hands, in the hum of engines, in the late-night echoes of her voice when I tried to sleep. And then, one Sunday morning, she showed up at the old park by the river, the one she'd told me she used to take her son to when he was little. She was sitting on a wooden bench, a book closed beside her. The sunlight caught the edges of her hair, turning them gold. She didn't look surprised when she saw me. You still come here? I asked, taking the seat next to her. Not often, she said, but sometimes I miss remembering. The wind carried the scent of wet grass and distant rain. Kids laughed somewhere behind us, their voices like ghosts from another time. We sat there quietly for a while, letting the silence do the talking. You ever think, she said at last, that some people just find you when you need to be seen? I looked at her, half smiling. I think that's exactly what happens. She turned her head toward me then, and there it was, that same unspoken pull. Only this time, she didn't hide from it. Her hand rested between us on the bench, close enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Sometimes, she whispered, it scares me how easy it is to forget the years between us when I'm with you. Her honesty cracked something open inside me. I didn't reach for her hand right away. I just looked at her, memorizing the way her eyes softened when she said that. Elena, I murmured, maybe what we're afraid of isn't wrong. It's just real. She closed her eyes, took a trembling breath, and then slowly, she let her hand slide into mine. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. But it was everything. Her fingers tightened slightly, like she was still giving herself a chance to pull away. When she didn't, I felt something shift. Not just between us, but inside her. All the walls she'd built, all the careful distance she'd held, they fell away, one heartbeat at a time. I don't know what this is, she said softly. You don't have to, I replied. It's enough that it's honest. She opened her eyes, meeting mine. There were tears in them, but not of regret. More like relief. I've spent so long being someone's mother, someone's ex-wife, someone's responsibility, she whispered. I forgot what it felt like to just be seen as me. And I see you, I said, not as anything else. She exhaled slowly, a sound that was half sigh, half surrender. And then, finally, she leaned her head against my shoulder. We didn't move. The world didn't either. The river shimmered quietly beside us, carrying time away like it always does. The sky above was overcast, but warm. Everything around us was ordinary, and that made it perfect. At some point, she started talking again, voice low and steady. I don't know how long this can last, she said. I don't even know what it means. But I do know it's the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel like running. I didn't answer right away. I just squeezed her hand, the way you do when words would only ruin it. For a long while, we sat there like that, her head on my shoulder, my heart beating too fast, both of us pretending not to count the seconds before the world would demand we let go. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated, looking at me like she was memorizing something. "Don't come looking for me tomorrow," she said quietly. "If I see you again, it should be because I couldn't stay away." And with that, she walked away down the gravel path, the sound of her footsteps mixing with the soft rush of the river. I watched her go, not with longing, but with a strange kind of peace, because for the first time, I knew she wasn't walking away from me. She was walking toward something, and maybe, somehow, that something still included me. It's strange how quiet life becomes after something like that. No big goodbye, no closure, just the echo of everything unsaid. For weeks, I didn't see her. Not at the grocery store, not in her garden, not even a flicker of her shadow through the window blinds I'd grown used to glancing at. It was as if she had folded herself back into the life she'd been trying to keep separate from me all along. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that what we shared was enough even if it ended there. But that was a lie. A quiet, polite lie I told to survive the stillness she left behind. Then one afternoon, I saw her again. She was standing outside the hardware store, holding a small pot of white daisies, the kind that always droop a little but never fully give up. Her hair was tied back loosely, and there was a calmness in her face I hadn't seen before. She saw me too. Her lips parted as if she was about to say something. Then she just smiled. That small, knowing smile that used to unravel me. "Hey," I said, walking up to her. "Hey." It was simple, but in her tone, I heard everything that didn't need to be spoken. Apology, warmth, a quiet kind of permission. "You been okay?" I asked. She nodded, looking down at the daisies. "Trying to be." "You?" "Same." We stood there, surrounded by the slow rhythm of ordinary life. Cars passing, wind chimes tinkling from the shop door, a man arguing over the price of paint. Everything was normal, but the air between us still held that faint electric pull. "I didn't think I'd see you again," I admitted. "I know," she said. "Neither did I." There was no awkwardness, no rehearsed speech. Just two people who had seen too much of each other to pretend it didn't matter, and yet learned enough to know some things aren't meant to be claimed. "I've been okay with the distance," she said after a moment, "but not with forgetting. I don't think I want to forget." "You won't," I told her. "Neither will I." She looked up then, her eyes steady. "You helped me remember who I was before everything got so quiet. You made me feel seen again." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "You did the same for me, just in a different way." We stood there for a long beat, not moving, not speaking, just watching the late sunlight move across the street like a slow confession. Then she said something that felt like the closing of a circle. "You know, I used to think love only belonged to a certain time in your life, when you're young enough to risk everything or old enough to understand it. But maybe it's not about timing. Maybe it's just about meeting someone who reminds you that you're still capable of feeling." I smiled because she was right, completely, achingly right. When we finally said goodbye, there were no promises, no talk of someday, just a shared look that said thank you for seeing me when I forgot how to be seen. I watched her walk away again, but this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something rare that had done what it was meant to do, wake us up. And in that moment, I understood what she'd given me wasn't a story to finish. It was a part of myself I didn't know I was missing. Now, when I pass her house and see the light on in her window, I don't ache the way I used to. I just smile quietly, knowing we both kept the best parts of what we were. I didn't just fall for an older woman. I fell into something rare, something true, something that reminded me that love, in all its quiet and impossible forms, isn't always meant to be kept. Sometimes it's meant to be remembered, and maybe that's enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?